right, so it's almost been 6 months since our trip together, and this is the first time that we've been back. So this is kind of our after action report to see what God has been doing and how you reflect back on the trip that we took to Colorado. So I'm going to throw out some questions to you. Hopefully it won't be too hard to come up with some answers. So one of the things that I'm curious about is that we did spend some time together before the trip. I tried to build a picture for you guys of what the trip was going to be like. So I'm kind of interested in what your expectations were before you went on the trip, and then how those expectations changed once you were in the trip itself. So Frank, what do you got?
Yeah, I would just say that, my expectations were that it was gonna be fun, it was gonna be challenging, we were gonna see some beautiful things, but I would say that my expectations were completely just blown out of the water when we actually went on the hikes, and just the way in which the Lord used each hike and each view that we saw to just move in my heart and in those around us. And so honestly, it was an incredible trip.
That's awesome. I know that each one of you, even though we were doing this together, had a unique experience to yourself. Anybody else want to add to that about what your expectations were and how God changed those during the trip?
I think for me, going into the trip, I knew it was going to be physically hard. Every time we talk about it, we're like, oh yeah, that trip, it's coming up. We gotta start training. Talk about that. But honestly, it was physically hard. But I think that something that I wasn't thinking about going into it was it's easier when you're with the group and you're carrying each other's burdens. There's a few times where I remember I mentally was getting a little bit not down, but just it gets hard when you're in those super long hikes. And I just remember there being just some really positive people saying no, we're doing great, we can slow down, we can take breaks, and that just meant a lot to me and really helped me center myself and remember that we're in it together and there's no shame in needing to do those things. And I don't know, that meant a lot to me. It's just we just had such a great group.
Yeah.
And that made it the challenge much easier.
Yeah, it was a great group. We kind of got disheveled a little bit because of some travel quirks, and so we moved some things around. So you guys had a really unique climb up Hope Pass. It was a pretty beautiful day going up, and it was the strenuous part of the hike really probably hit you on Hope Pass. Anybody want to talk about their experience on Hope Pass, which was our second hike? Jake?
Sure, yeah. No, Hope Pass was honestly probably one of my favorite hikes of the whole trip. I mean, nothing beats Mount Elbert, but Hope Pass and Independence Pass both were pretty awesome. But I think kind of similar to what Ali said with the expectations was that, we knew going into it that the hikes were going to be probably pretty difficult. But then at Hope Pass, when we started off all good, everyone's super jolly, happy, laughing, and then we started getting almost right to the point where we're summiting that pass there, and everyone's tanked out a little bit, really low on fuel, but just the positive energy from the group was amazing. Being able to lean on one another, give hope to one another, and then obviously getting up to the up the way up to Hope Pass there, and just the view out, and then of course it starts snowing a little bit. Whatever God was throwing at us, nothing ruined that moment. It was just so beautiful, great to share with everyone.
It was a positive moment. I've been up Hope Pass several times, but watching you guys crest that, how did you feel, Shelby, when you made Hope Pass?
I think it's a moment that takes your breath away almost. I've had a few moments in nature that you see something for the first time and it just makes you in awe of it, right? And so you have that really hard climb and you're passing snow and you're having snow pelt your ears and covering your ears, and then you get up there and it's just something that you never thought that you would see at the top of it when you got to the top of it. So,
it is a pretty emotional moment.
Yeah.
It always is for me, no matter how many times that I do it. Yeah. To see you guys kind of share that moment with each other and then share it together as couples, as you kind of embrace each other, pretty powerful moments. one of my favorites is watching, Frank and his, that was a hard climb, and him and Allie, him and Caleb getting that moment together when they were walking back. It was really powerful moment. So one of the first devotionals that we had was about how God took his people out of Egypt, and he could have taken them the easy way to the promised land. But instead of taking the easy way, he actually took them a harder way, a longer way, because he had some things that could not be taught through the easy way. So we walked our way through that lesson. So I'm interested to know how God was teaching you about spiritual truths, about how he might take you the hard way in order to teach you things. Kevin?
Yeah, I think going to Mount Elbert, I was remembering how there was the easy way, quote unquote. It was steeper, less distance, less time. So in my eyes, that's easy. And then we took the harder route, in my opinion, that was less of an incline. It was easier to hike, but it took a lot longer. So the reason why I think that was harder for me is because I'm impatient. And I struggled with it initially because I'm like, I could just get so much faster if we just took the steep route. But then I'm thinking, as the group, if we don't do that together as a group, the less incline, we're not going to make it. It's just not going to be possible. And so when I think of the Israelites leaving Egypt and going the harder route, the Lord showed them many things along that journey. And I felt like I had more time to think when we were on the slower or longer route because it was slower and you have time to slow down and take in the view versus, my mentality is just to go, go, go. And honestly, it was a step back from that. And I didn't find it like super hard to do the Mount Elbert going up. However, on the way down, it was very challenging.
Yeah.
And I struggled and I was like down and I had a headache and I didn't want to be there. It was just so hard. And looking back at it, I learned so many valuable things as in like sticking together as a team and encouraging one another and carrying each other's burdens, like you said, Allie. There was so many valuable things that I learned from going the harder route. And so, yeah.
So let's talk about Mount Elbert for a second, because I really did my best to set you up with, we need to get there before noon. Mountain weather is really volatile. We left, what time was it that we left? Probably 3 a.m. So it was a good early morning, super dark. Frank was wide awake. It was a beautiful morning though. How do you remember when we turned off our headlights and just looked at the night sky? It was just one of my favorite moments from that entire trip. So long climb, and no doubt you guys all did amazing. I loved greeting you at the top, seeing your face. And then it was so beautiful at the top. The weather was perfect, and we stayed there probably a bit too long. Would you agree?
Maybe.
The parasailer.
we got caught up in the moments. A few of us left to head down. A few of you stayed a little bit longer, and then the weather just turned absolutely vicious. So hail, and it was super cold, lightning. It was crazy, and there's questions like, what do we do? And I just kept telling you, you just gotta keep going, right? You just gotta keep going. How was that? How was that journey for you as it relates to the hard way? Kaylee?
Definitely challenging. I remember getting to the top and just being in awe of God's creation, and it was all worth it, but it was definitely hard coming down. Frank was experiencing elevation sickness, so that was tough, was trying to encourage him while still make it down with the hail and the lightning right next to you was a little bit scary.
Yeah.
But we did it.
Yeah.
It was worth it.
So the two people that were probably aces for me and for the rest of this group were Jake and Shelby. because they had determined long before any of this happened that they were going to have good attitudes. It was challenged, I'm sure, on that descent.
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah. it was such a good, I wouldn't have had it any other way. You know, I think scripture says that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, you know? And I think that was almost like the epiphany of what scripture says. We got up there, everything was picture perfect, the hike was amazing, and then on the way down, after coming off the high of being up there, that's when like it was like, well, now we got 70 miles to go and rainy, lightning weather, and everyone's wet and cold, but it was still so much fun.
Yeah. So I remember reaching a point when we finally got to the tree line. Remember that? We finally got just a little bit of cover. Kevin and Allie were just a little bit behind and we were waiting. How would you describe Kevin and Allie's faces when you finally saw them?
Maybe like we're not at the end yet. Like, we still have halfway to go.
So I think for every experience that I've had with Kevin, this is the look that Kevin has had. That was not the look that I've had. I've never seen a man more dejected in a moment. You know? And he's like, I just need to take a break. And you guys can go on. And as a group, you guys, what did we decide? We're not going to go. We're going to do this together, right? And it was a hard trip down. How did you feel when you made it to the end?
It felt amazing. I had the worst headache that I've ever had going down the mountain, and I didn't think I would have any challenge going down because I made it up just fine. But I was sprinting down, thinking all these thoughts. Oh my goodness, I might have to carry my wife down. She might break a ankle. We might die up here. What do I tell my parents? Like I had so many thoughts, and it was just going down this like catastrophizing road, and I didn't like it. And then when I finally saw you guys, there was just like this mixture of emotions, like, oh my goodness, what you and I didn't even know what to think. I just needed a break. I was like, we need a break. It was so challenging physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually too. Just going down the mountain with all the elements around you too, and you're kind of out in the middle, like no trees, and you're above the tree line, and you're thinking, I could get struck by lightning right now, and this could be my last day.
Yeah.
And when you have those thoughts, and then you see your team at the end, you're like, oh, I'm safe. You're at the tree line. I made it to safety. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah. One of the most amazing pictures in my mind is when we finally made it back to the house and Kevin is completely in a prone position, completely laid out. He was absolutely tapped. We're done. So one of our other lessons that we had, and we borrowed a little bit of this from Rick Warren, as he talked about the significance of groups and about how that first level is when you just play together, and then when you learn then to serve together. But the ultimate level, right, is suffering together. And we kind of latched on to that. How did God reinforce that idea of the benefit of suffering together?
I think it just makes it better. Like we had said, you have other people to encourage you, or like when you're feeling like you can't go anymore and you feel like you're really suffering, then you have a group of people who don't demean you for it, but rather like lift you up in that moment of like, you can do it and we're going to do it with you. Like nobody's going to leave you behind. We're walking side by side and we're going to do it.
Yeah, and I think Allie had a pretty hard hope pass, experience, and I'm sure she was thinking a lot about whether she was going to be able to make Elbert in a couple of days, and to see you guys gel around each other and really climb together and then descend together in less than optimal situations. It was really cool as a leader to sit back and watch you guys do what you did for each other. and to realize this is really what God was talking about, right? When Jake and Shelby are singing behind all of you and are laughing, and Kevin's got a headache, but Jake and Shelby refuse to allow this to be a down moment, and then pretty soon it works through the rest of us too, that, you know what, we are outside enjoying God's amazing creation, and God has given us this amazing blessing. It's been hard, but we've been able to do it together, and it becomes a common bond. You guys have a bond for the rest of your life around this particular event. Any other thoughts about suffering together?
I just say it's a reminder that when you're going through something hard, you don't have to go through it alone, because you have a community of people around you that are willing to help. And I think, for me, I was kind of struggling a little bit on Mount Elbert because of the elevation gain and everything like that, and blisters that were forming. And I had people like offering to help because they could see that maybe I was like struggling. And for me, my first instinct is to not accept the help because I want to feel like I am doing it on my own. And so it was a reminder that I don't always have to do it all.
Right.
And it's okay to ask for help.
So that reminds me of something that was pretty amazing, right? So we all got backpacks. And one of the very first things that we can do for each other is, hey, I'll take your backpack. That's a hard moment. Right? It's kind of a humbling moment, but it really helps. And I go back to what Galatians says about bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. That is a very tangible way that you guys got to see that. And first, you have to be willing to give somebody the privilege of bearing that burden. And then you have to be willing to take on that burden. And I think Allie, somebody was carrying your pack for a while, and Frank, somebody was carrying your pack for a while, and we were eager to do that. Pretty cool moment for you guys to see that happening. Frank, how hard was it to give up the pack?
It was very difficult because I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it, And then, but once you could physically feel that come off of you, right? And then Jake, I think you took my backpack for a while, and it felt really good because it made that part easier for me.
Right.
In that moment.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you were able to accomplish the goal together.
Yeah. Which was the best part for me was seeing you guys as a group. I just kind of stood back for a while on top of Mount Elbert and just watched you guys laugh and enjoy the moment, and then watch Frank fall asleep. To see you guys within that context, realizing that you guys were able to do this together, and it was amazingly beautiful when we made it to the top. And I kept telling you that God was spoiling you because we did have some amazing weather to hike into. So, all right, so let me kind of close with a question that I want all of you to answer, and that is, what one thing do you take away from this trip that God taught you? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but I'm hoping that God did teach you something. Maybe it was a number of different things. But if you could kind of boil it down to, man, this is the one thing that I really took from this trip that God really impressed upon my heart, taught me or challenged me with, what would that be? Got something, Jake?
Yeah. So like, what something that he placed in my heart right away was like, we have a plan, and then don't matter. We have this plan, and then God's gonna change it around, 360 it, double backflip, everything. So like, just for us, from like our flights down and everything, we had a plan. We're all flying together. We're all going down, and then we all went our separate ways. But then we still all got there, right? Pretty close, within the same time, honestly, And then first morning, we all had like the plan of, we're gonna hike that day, and we were still able to do that with this, all in God's plan. There's just, he's the only one that knows why we weren't all supposed to be on the same airplane on the way down. But
I know my plan didn't involve sleeping on the floor in the Charlotte airport.
Freezing, vacuum
That was not on the plan. That was not in the brochure, I'm pretty sure. That was excellent. And you guys, again, were amazing. Just giving me perspective in that. Because it's disappointing because I wanted us to travel together. And good grief, we had couples separated. Yeah, you guys were already there waiting on us, wondering if we were ever going to arrive. It was quite chaotic. So, Frank, how about you? What did God teach you?
Yeah, I would just say that you're capable of doing hard things, and it's in those moments that really test your faith. And I would say that obviously just community, and there's so much importance in community and suffering together.
I think it just goes back to Hebrews 10, verse 24 and 25, where we're called to love one another and build one another up in good works, and just continue to fight the good fight and press forward. And I was just thinking back to the mountains when we were all challenged in a way, and we were loving one another, we were encouraging one another on the mountain, and we were building each other up for good works. This is the best analogy that I think you can get of unity of the church behind the whole thing. Because after the trip, Allie and I were away from our church, and it really became clear when you need the church in your life, and this is the church. So that's the biggest takeaway.
I think for me, every time I think back to the trip, the main thing that God kind of showed me was he kept reminding me during our hikes and everything of the verse, my grace is sufficient for you because my power is made perfect in your weakness. And I think I was going into the trip, I know my weakness, I know that this might be challenging, but at the time I was not willing to admit my weakness. And it also kind of changed for me after the Hope Pass hike. We were in that little store, and PK comes up to me and he was like, you're doing better than about 20% of the people that I take on this trip. And I was it really was so good for me to hear that, because I was holding on to this, just I just want to do this, and I'm just gonna grind it out, in my own strength. And the Lord was just reminding me that he came to earth and suffered the most that we could ever imagine so that we could have his power. Why would I rely on my own strength when I have that power just so accessible to me? There's nothing I did for that. And I think that was really humbling, experiencing a physical suffering. The Lord specifically reminded me of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
For me, it was the importance of suffering together, and just made visible, on the hikes. We were all at different paces, but we kept up with one another, encouraged one another, took the hike at different paces. And also just the importance of not doing things on your own. I know sometimes I try to just stick it out and then get it done, but it's okay to show that maybe it's not okay right now, and to just lean on other people to get you through hard times.
Shelby?
Yeah, I think about the idea that God is sovereign, and not only over he created the mountains and the nature that we're walking through, but we can completely surrender our control. And I think we had to in a lot of ways on the trip, whether it was our travels down or on the mountain when we can't control the weather that we're in, and we can choose to go down in the depths about it, or we can just know that God is in control of it, and we can change our perspective.
Yeah, you challenge me so much in that. And Shelby was such an encouragement to me in that way, because you always have a picture of what it's supposed to be. And God's way, like Jake has been saying, is not necessarily that way. And just to rest in the fact that He is sovereign, that this is inside of His hands, and He's going to manage this for you and with you. Pretty amazing. Good. So, what's one memory that you have that comes right to the top about this trip? When you think about that week that we spent together, it might not have been on a mountain, right? It might not have been on a hike.
Never forget carrying the luggage up the mountain.
In the dark, not knowing much else it was, right? Yeah, roads that didn't make any sense, and Oh, I'm so glad that you didn't have to sleep in the car. That night, you know?
So we made cars.
Yeah, that's like I'm trying to make the
We're gonna push the
Toyota.
car up there.
Oh, yeah, that Toyota. Yeah.
I think for me, every time I think of the trip, I immediately just think of that moment when you finally take that last step at the top of Mount Elbert, and just the kind of emotion
Yeah.
that came with that. I remember for me, like, it was an emotional moment, and I just felt like, wow, you know, the same hands that formed these mountains are the same hands that bled for me, and I just remember
Yeah.
feeling just really overwhelmed by how beautiful it was, because I was not expecting that, just to just feel that emotion over me right in that moment. And I've tried, like, if I was having a rough day since then, to just kind of like think of that
Yeah.
and think of how good God is.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Anybody else? What's that moment that you think about?
Mine was the stars moment at the beginning of the Mount Elbert hike, and just the like preparation that morning for it, like the drive there, and then not being on the right trail, and just kind of like you have a lot of emotions that you're feeling, right? But taking a full minute to be in complete darkness and looking up at the stars, and just like having that moment with God, I think was huge, and in awe of the stars and the heavens that He created.
And God, once again, kind of spoiled us with this amazing starlit night, shooting stars across the sky. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I was so taken aback by that moment. That's definitely one that sticks in my mind too. Anybody else?
Yeah, same day, just a couple hours later, watching the sunrise.
Oh, yeah.
It's above the tree line, you know, we just crest the tree line, and then we just see right over the mountain, the sun just popping up. It was so gorgeous. And I think I remember it more because Ellie illustrated a photo of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's my background.
Oh,
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Captured that moment with the silhouettes, and that was amazing. Yeah, it was so good. Anybody else? All right, so what would you tell somebody that's thinking about going on this trip? How would you encourage them that maybe this might be something that God would want for them? Was it worth 7 days of your life?
Definitely.
I think you can go in with a lot of ideas of what it's going to be like, right? Like Franklin said, I think earlier, you think that you're going to climb a mountain, you're going to be in nature, you're going to do all these things, but like you can have all the expectations and it's still going to blow you away and be completely different than what you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
So like almost go into it, know that like you probably aren't going to be doing what you think
Yeah,
you're going to be doing.
That's perfect. Yeah, to live with that anticipation.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Why should somebody do this? Why was it worth 7 days of your life?
I would say a good reason to do it is not only, you know, does it help you get like a closer relationship with the Lord, but it's something that challenges you. And, you know, I think there's a lot of different challenges in this life that we face in our daily lives, whether it's work, whether it's family problems, anything. But just the big thing, like going on this trip and being challenged and that, just seeing how you can overcome these challenges and how God brings you through, you know, like the challenge of even climbing a mountain. I think that's something that would be really cool for other people to experience as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, before we close, I just want to tell you that, man, it was such a privilege for me to be on this trip with you. Whether it was climbing or playing ping pong downstairs and seeing Frank finally hit it. There was a lot of rejoicing at that moment, but I just so enjoyed listening to you guys, and you taught me what God was using and doing in your life was also teaching me. So I was so excited to get to the end of every day and to hear what God was doing in your life, because I just knew that as you shared that you were speaking into my life too, and it was making a difference in my life. So thank you guys. It was a good trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.